The Tenant. There was absolutely nothing remarkable about the day when I shakily stumbled into the small bar. Hell, I don't know if anyone in the bar even noticed me until I dumped myself into one of the stools and ordered, "Double scotch." The bartender looked me up and down but said nothing as he poured. Did he often get guys that come in for some day drinking with their arms and legs covered in cuts, bruises, and scratches? Seemed like the type that had seen it all, so maybe he just didn't care. "That's $5.50. I slid him my credit card that was supposed to be reserved for emergency situations. I think this qualified. Open a tab and pour it again. And after a brief hesitation, "Please." My hands were shaking as I grabbed the drink. Great, now they're gonna think I'm some drunk falling off the wagon here to stave off the DTs, I thought as I used my other hand to steady the glass to my lips. Fuck it. I need some goddamn normalcy, and a hard drink and some freaking manners were just the things to help me get started back on my way. The dark, peaty drink warmed me as it went down, and I had to grit my teeth and bow my head to keep my nerves from making me vomit it all back up. I gripped the edge of the bar like a vice, sitting there silently waiting for the effects of the alcohol to kick in, waiting for some semblance of normalcy. I waited a moment and then tapped my finger on the bar loudly next to the glass. "Not for nothing, kid. You're a big guy, but you might want to slow it down a bit. At least get some food in you before you keep going at it like this." He grabbed the bottle and poured me another. I reached my hand out for it, but came up empty. "Try sipping this one, Chief." He slid the glass back to me. I was tempted to slam it back like I had the first two. Instead, I took the glass, steadied myself, and sipped slowly at the drink. Seems our friendly bartender had slipped some ice in the glass when I wasn't looking. "There, now how about a hot meal to set you right? We've got a roast beef sandwich come with a choice of 2 sides. Get that down in ya, and it'll help set you to rights." I looked up at him, not even sure what to say. This guy didn't seem too much older than me to be calling me kid, and somehow his world-weary voice seemed like he knew it all and seen it all. I looked through him, but slowly nodded my head. "Fries and mashed potatoes with gravy, please." That seemed to put a smile on his face, and he scuffled back into the kitchen to get my order up. I tried my best to keep sipping at the drink slowly, letting the flavors unwind in the ice water. I was able to make it last until he came back with my food. Surprisingly, I wolfed it down. I thought after what I'd been through I wouldn't be able to eat again for weeks. The idea of eating, The booze was starting to kick in, and I was able to let the thought go as I scooped up spuds and gravy with the fries. My head was swimming pleasantly as I mopped up everything left on the plate with the sandwich roll and stuffed it into my face. The bartender just sat there nodding knowingly. When I was done, there was a new drink with fresh ice in it waiting for me. I had the glass in a death grip when the bartender leaned in and signaled me to do the same. He glanced conspicuously around the bar, only 1 or 2 others in the cozy little spot. "Kid, you ain't gonna find normal chasing after Johnny Walker." "Then what the hell am I supposed to do?" "Talking seems to work for most folks. Why don't you give her a try?" I shook my head. I didn't want to relive what I had just been through. I didn't want to be ridiculed for it. He wouldn't believe me, and I told him as much. "Kid, when you've been doing this as long as I has, you get a feel for what's bullshit and what ain't. Try me." And so I began. It all started a couple months back. I was desperately looking for a new place to stay. I was calling friends, calling relatives, and hitting every website I possibly could trying to find a place to live. Life is hard on a college student that hasn't found a summer job. My life had changed pretty dramatically just a month before, and here I was trying to find a place to live until the fall semester started so I could move back on campus. My plans had fallen through, and what I needed most was a job and a cheap place to crash while I got back on my feet and finish out my degree. Honestly, I was starting to think I would have to change my plans again and end up moving in with distant relatives that didn't know or like me too much when I got the email. It was a reply from an inquiry I had sent from Craigslist. Normally, I wouldn't have bothered, but it was that or go hat in hands to the last remaining ties to my recently dead parents, and I was too prideful for that. The ad had simply read, "Tenant wanted, low rent / chores for rent, background check and references required," and had a picture of an old gothic brick house. I Google mapped the place, and sure enough, it was a real house that matched the picture, So against my better judgment, I emailed the person posting the room and explained that I was a hard worker with experience in yard work and upkeeping old houses, along with the background information. The response was simple: Thursday, 10 a.m., front door. Sheesh, someone needed to work on their people skills. Still, I needed a place to stay and a job, and this would at least satisfy one of these two things, and it might give me a lead on the other. I showed up at the appointed day and time and stepped onto the porch leading to the front door. Out of place for a house this old, I saw an intercom next to the door. Days later, I would notice security cameras mounted inconspicuously around the house. "Good morning, I'm here about the room for rent." "Come in. Be sure to take your shoes off in the vestibule." And with that, the door buzzed open and I stepped in. These old Gothic houses, man, they're a trip. A whole room dedicated to shutting the door, taking off your coat and shoes, and further isolating you from the outside. It looked like this one was pretty nice at one point, but was in need of some basic repair beyond a good cleaning. I did what I was told and then tried the door leading into the main house. Locked. Unbelievable. What kind of security nut was this person? I mean, an intercom and a buzzer to get in, and a separate one for the glorified coat room? Someone must think pretty highly of themselves. Looks like I could look forward to being ordered around near constantly for the next couple of weeks, or until I could find a job to save up enough to move out. I hit another buzzer and there was no response until the door itself audibly unlatched and I walked in. The house was a lot more open on the inside than I had imagined. There was lots of fading wood paneling and faded wallpaper everywhere. While not in total disrepair, I was definitely getting a broke-down palace vibe from this place. Even in my socks, the hardwood floors creaked as my feet made soft thuds when I entered the main hallway. Where was the landlord? I had been walking into this place, and so far, other than the voice on the intercom, there wasn't any indication that anyone was here. "Hello?" I called, listening for some sort of response. "In here," was the curt response. I followed the sound of the voice into the kitchen, where deep on the other side of the room stood a woman, almost hiding herself in the archway. "Hi, I'm—" "No slippers," she interrupted. "Excuse me? You entered someone else's house and you walk around in your socks? Socks that have who knows what on them?" I looked down at my socks. They were actually a pretty good pair, one of my newer sets for sure, but I didn't exactly have a response. This was starting to take a turn towards the weird, and I didn't think I wanted much more. "Well, never mind." Her words were short and fast, like she was forcing them out. She was looking really uncomfortable to be there. "Listen, this house has been in my family for generations. It may not be what it once was, but please treat it with respect." I nodded, not sure what else to do. "This area used to be the servants' quarters. There's a kitchenette, a bathroom with shower, and a bedroom. You can have free reign of this floor and the basement, but as part of the conditions of your lease, I expect basic upkeep and chores to help keep the place going. You are handy, aren't you?" That wasn't a lie. "No, miss, I'm handy." "Good. Then once you sign the lease on the table and you've got your things moved in, the lawn needs mowing and I have a list of errands for you to run." She pointed at a stack of papers on a small table. I walked towards them, noticing that she seemingly kept her distance by edging her way around the room as I moved towards the table. "Wait, so it's not just the room, it's this whole floor?" "Correct, only this floor and the basement. In exchange for yard work, some basic repairs, and helping run some errands, you can stay here rent-free. I'll be giving you some grocery lists. Whatever you want to add within reason, you're welcome to. But in exchange, I expect you to put blood, sweat, and tears into this place." With that, I looked up and smiled. This was exactly the kind of thing I was looking for. I could spend the summer staying here and come fall be back to school with maybe enough money in my pocket to pay for room and board. I signed the papers. Looking at the last page, I finally saw my landlord's name. Connie? Yes. She looked both taken aback and surprised that I had called her by her name. I stood up and walked toward her, even though she seemed apprehensive. "It's nice to meet you. I'm Jack. I had meant to raise my hand for a handshake, but when I brushed it against the archway, somehow I scratched it pretty bad. The pain didn't register until I saw the fat droplets of blood welling up from the back edge of my hand. As soon as it started to hurt, I pulled it back, rushing back towards the sink I had seen in the kitchen. In all the commotion, I hadn't seen Connie go so far up the stairs. "Looks like the house is eager to meet you too," she smirked. "There's a first aid kit under the sink, and a bigger one in the bathroom if it's too bad. Remember, the upstairs is my space, and you're not to go up there unless it's a dire emergency." Sure," I managed, as I watched crimson beads well up and drop, breaking up and disperse from the water of the faucet, sliding down into the drain. The scratch wasn't bad, but it was enough to make me bleed. I could have sworn I bled on the floor, but when I checked I couldn't find any. Just lucky, I guess. Weeks passed. Before I knew it, more than half of the summer was gone. I looked for work but didn't find too much. Connie kept me pretty busy with errands. It seemed like I was constantly doing things for her, but still I couldn't complain too much. I was paying $0 on rent and $0 on food and utilities. I would push mow that ridiculously large lawn every week until hell froze over, if it meant this deal kept up. Connie had very slowly warmed up to me. Over the first couple of weeks, I don't think I saw her at all. In fact, the only communication was notes left for me in the dumbwaiter. She'd send down a list of chores or a list of things she needed, and I would supply them. It all made me wonder how long it had been since she had actually left the house. That was the other thing. She was insanely picky about where everything in the house was placed. She said I had free reign, but anytime I moved stuff, it would be back exactly where it was before, and sometimes I might find a little passive-aggressive note waiting for me the next day. All in all, I couldn't complain. Even though I wasn't having any luck finding a job, Connie gave me enough of an allowance that I was putting a little bit of money away on top of the money she left for groceries and house repairs. It was enough to keep me coming back to the place. I was comfortable for the time being, so there was really no reason to look too hard. I can't say when the scratches began in earnest. Looking back at it, it had to be around the time that Connie started warming up to me. After weeks of clearing gutters, mowing lawns, washing dishes, and running errands, Connie started to get comfortable with me. It was subtle at first. I might catch a glimpse of her watching me from a window as I worked in the yard, or she might sit on the stairs when I was in the living room watching TV. Slowly, the notes became less demanding, and they actually seemed friendly. This was such a welcome change. I actually began to work harder around the place. Somewhere in there, I installed some massive wall AC units that actually made the place livable in the insanely muggy summer. It was after that she really started to be nice to me. I thought for sure working on her precious house without getting her express permission was going to set her off. Luckily, it was the opposite. Maybe the hot weather had just been getting to her, but once I had those machines up and running, the place was way nicer to live in. It was a good thing I had those units, too. After I put them in, it seems like all the damn splinters in the house were coming out. I must have spent days in that house replacing floorboards, sanding, the whole 9 yards, only to get a splinter or scratch someplace new. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm no contractor, no pro carpenter. No one is going to mistake me for Bob Villa. So when I would nick or pinch myself fixing up the place, I would just chalk it up to rust or inexperience. Hell, most of the time I didn't even see the wound bleed. I just figured that since I had taken care of all the easy jobs first, that the reason I kept getting hurt was the repairs kept getting harder and harder. I honestly didn't even think about it until one particularly bad gash, and I went to the various first aid kits only to find no bandages. I was holding my arm with a paper towel, and for the life of me I couldn't find a bandage. I was bleeding pretty bad, so I grabbed some duct tape and wrapped it around my arm to hold the makeshift bandage on. The bleeding had stopped by the time I got to the clinic, but not before I stained up parts of my own car. The doc in a box cleaned it up and taped it down. No need for stitches. It wasn't until she was finished with the fresh wound that she looked closely at my arms. They were a crisscross of all the various scrapes and cuts I had recently accumulated. The keen doctor looked at my arms, and then stared at me over the rim of her glasses. "You know, I have a booklet. There's a number you can call. I can give you the name of a professional." "Oh, no thanks. The repairs aren't that serious yet. Plus, I look for that kind of stuff online now anyway." She shook her head at me like I was playing dumb. "These cuts. I'm talking about someone you can talk to about these cuts. It's not good to hurt yourself. I can recommend some people if you let me." I was taken aback. I didn't know what to say. I just told her it wasn't what she thought and thanked her. Her nurse passed me a script for an antibiotic cream, and on the discharge papers I couldn't help but notice the cutting and self-harm helpline number scribbled on the bottom of one of the pages. It was a wake-up call. When I went to the pharmacy in the local grocery store, I went to the first aid section to restock our kits. When I reached for 2 bottles of generic hydrogen peroxide, I really saw my own arms. They were a quiltwork of poorly healing cuts and scratches. Even though it had been months, the spot on my hand from my first day hadn't really healed. It was barely scabbed over. As much work as I had been doing, my hands should have been calloused and tough, but instead there was just a series of badly healing cuts. I got my supplies and headed out. What in the hell was going on? I mean, sure, I was getting a bit scraped up, but what the hell? And why weren't my scratches healing? Even the little ones should have been healed up by now. Maybe I should go to a specialist, or at least a family doctor. I didn't have much time to think about it. Soon I was back in the house. I wanted to get the blood cleaned up before Connie came and had a conniption about messing up her family's precious house. Seems like I was worried about nothing. There was hardly a mess, save for a few trouble spots where it seemed the blood had really soaked in. I scrubbed pretty hard before I stopped fighting it and called it a day. I was so sick of it all, the house, the nerve of that doctor, all of it. It was really starting to get to me, so I cranked up the AC, flipped on the TV, and I decided to veg. I started drinking. They say that 5 drinks is binging for a guy, but I was way beyond that, and way beyond caring. As comfortable as the deal I made was, school would be back soon, and I would have to head back to campus. There was no way I could keep up this kind of repair schedule and study. I had really tied one on when I stumbled back to my room. I had meant to throw myself on the bed. Instead, the bed that had always been exactly in the same spot since I moved in was a tiny bit further away than it had been. The fuck? I hit my head pretty good, much harder, and I would have been bleeding all over the place. What the hell was going on around here? I chalked it up to too much to drink, and I tried to sleep it off. Surprisingly, the next day, Connie was friendlier than ever. She actually came onto the back deck under the awning to watch me work in the garden. That gave me pause. As nice as it was that she was coming out of her shell, people don't usually change that quickly. She had been a near-total shut-in just a few months prior, and from someone who had been exceedingly short with me to casually hanging out with me. Something was going on. I just didn't know what. Maybe it was all in my head. Since my parents died, I'd been under a lot of stress, and maybe that's just how my brain was manifesting it. It could be that the tools had just been misplaced, or things weren't quite right when I returned into a room. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but I know it wasn't right. If it was Connie messing around with me, I was going to catch her in the act. Messing around the house with the tools was one thing, but the room was my spot, and I could have been hurt. So out of desperation, I set up a camera in my room to help me figure out what was going on. A very small, very discreet camera that I didn't tell anyone about. Smaller than a GoPro, it shot HD video to a DVR so that I could watch it later. Then I sat back and waited. This went on for about a week. Shit got crazy. Connie was the nicest she'd ever been. It seemed like all of the repairs started going right, and it was at least a week since the last time I was scratched. No tools went missing, all right where I left them, and the chores seemed way easier. It was almost enough to make me forget about the camera. With seemingly nothing happening, I thought maybe I should just let it go, but just a week before I was convinced that someone was rearranging and moving things in the house. Now I know better. I watched the video, and wish I hadn't. The second time I checked my little spy cam, I caught something horrific on it. I had been fast-forwarding through the DVR when something caught my eye. I was checking footage from a day I was out running errands in town. It was really kind of crazy that I caught it. If I had blinked, I probably would have missed it. Slowly, the door to my room began to open. Except it didn't just open, it started to rock a little bit, then to sway. Soon it was opening and closing pretty rapidly until it stopped. I kicked on the audio to hear whatever the hell was going with what I was seeing. Then, bang! Silence. Bang! Silence. The slam started to get louder. Faster. No longer rhythmic. Bang! 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 Harder still, the door started to thrash. Bang! 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 Finally, the windows started joining in, banging right along with the door. This continued until everything in my room was jumping or thrashing or smashing when I and nobody else were around to do anything. I had to get out of there. What in the actual fuck was going on? Be cool, Jack. Be cool. Maybe it was just some sort of trick. But why? And to what end? This was the real deal. I thought maybe someone was gaslighting me, but here it was, irrefutable evidence that the freaking house was haunted and trying to mess me up. I had to get Connie and get out of here. I couldn't stay in the house. I started to yell for her. Connie! Connie? Where are you? We have to leave now! This is an emergency. Connie, if you can hear me, answer me! I searched the house. No sign of her. Part of me wanted to believe that she had made such great strides that she had just left, but I couldn't be sure. I mean, people just don't change that fast, do they? I moved to the base of the stairs, pausing at the first step. That had always been Connie's hard and fast rule. I wasn't allowed upstairs. But shit, this was an emergency. I had had enough. I bolted up the stairs. I felt sick to my stomach when I reached the landing. Something wasn't right up here. There was a terrible smell and an oppressive feeling, and I couldn't hear the outside. Connie, are you up here? Instinctually, I called softly. Somehow yelling seemed wrong. Cautiously, I moved across the landings, trying to figure out what room was Connie's. The sickly sweet smell was overwhelming, but I had to push forward. As I pushed ahead, I checked each room one by one. Every room on the second floor was empty except for the last. When I pushed the door open, I fell to my knees. What the hell? What the hell? Every last inch of the room, from floor to ceiling, was covered in strange symbols and runes. I had no clue what any of it meant, but since it looked like they had been drawn in blood, I knew it was time to leave. I sat there on the rug, motionless. I stared into the cursed room. I know I shouldn't, but the longer I looked, the harder it was to pull away. The longer I looked, the more it seemed the room was alive and pulsating. The walls, ever so slightly, were squirming, a squishy whisper coming from them. The longer I stared, the more I could hear it, the more I could see it. I panicked. I bolted out of there. Not sure what to do, I taped a note to the door. I explained the camera and everything, scribbling it down as fast as I could. Then I took off. I drove to a nearby hotel, unsure what to do. I didn't even have Connie's number to call to warn her. I couldn't go to the police. What was I going to tell them? Hell, I didn't even know what the fuck to tell myself. I'd show them the video, but I left the camera and practically everything else I owned back in the room. Fuck. I had to go back. My whole life was practically in that little room. I would go back and be in and out and get my shit and leave. Whatever the hell was wrong with that house could be its problem, 'cause I wasn't having it anymore. I tossed and turned that night at the hotel, worrying about Connie. Did she know? Was she a part of this? What exactly did I know about this person I had been sharing a house with? Dawn came, and I figured I would get this done early. I couldn't sleep anyway. I pulled up to the house terrified, but with a resolve to grab my bag full of my most important things and leave. I approached the house, still hesitant. Looking up at the old familiar cameras, I entered my code and turned the key to the house. Walking through the house, I wasn't going to take my shoes off this time, is what I would have thought had I been able to finish the thought. I woke up tied to a chair. I still don't know what hit me, but Connie was there in hysterics. She was crying and screaming, talking to someone I couldn't see, and waving a large knife around. Oh dear God, I'm in the upstairs room. I tried to carefully slide free, but it was no use. I was bound tightly. Instead, I turned to Connie. It took her a while to realize I was watching her, but she came screaming at me with the knife when she did. I told you never to come up here, didn't I? It didn't have to be like this. Her crying, bloodshot eyes were bulging, and she kept waving the knife like crazy. Connie, I don't understand. You gotta let me go. You don't understand. We have to go. This house. Oh no. No, 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 no. We don't get to go. This house has been in my family for generations. This house is practically my family. You have to take care of family. I can't leave this house." Something like a squeaky board and a rattling pipe banging at the same time answered her. No, I'm sorry. Please, it doesn't have to be this way. He doesn't." I couldn't tell who she was talking to anymore. One minute she would be seemingly talking to me, the next to the freaking house. Finally, a look of resignation came over her face. "I'm sorry, Jack. It has to be this way. I was really hoping that with you, it didn't have to be this way. But I have to do it, Jack. This house is possessed. If I don't sacrifice someone to it, it will start killing on its own. Who knows how far that might lead. I'll make it quick, painless. I'll do what I have to as many times as I have to keep this house satisfied." As many times? You've done this before? Oh my God, how many people had she lured here? I had to keep stalling, keep buying time to try and get out. Like I said, this house has been in my family for generations, and for generations, we were the only ones keeping this evil contained, with the only methods we knew how. Don't you see, Jack? It has to eat. Every so often it needs to eat. The house, it's hungry. It's not satisfied with these little tastes anymore. It needs to eat. With that, she pulled away from me and started reading what looked to be a very old leather-bound book, chanting. Soon the words took on a life of their own, and the squirming of the walls began in earnest. "I really didn't want it to go this way, Jack. At first, you were just a mark like all the others, but then you actually tried to do good around here. But I told you, never go upstairs." I begged her to stop. I pleaded with her. But as she took the knife and cut slits on both shoulders, I knew she was bleeding me like a stuck pig. With tears running down her eyes, I could see she was conflicted. It was just dawning on me how practiced she was at this. Still, as many times as she had done this, for whatever reason, she was having second thoughts. I looked at her, pleading. "It's too late, Jack. I'm sorry." She trailed off. "No, it's not. It's not too late. Never too late. Come on now. Talk to me." "I'm sorry. This is the way it has to be." With that, she put a gag in my mouth. "Please," I mumbled through a mouthful of fabric. "Please, you don't have to do this." Every word muffled. I tried harder as I heard a terrible groaning noise. I looked down and the damn floor was coming apart. I began to scream. Not for help, not for mercy, just terrible primal screams. The floorboard was raising up, nails and all, towards me. Screws and fasteners like rusty spikes, and fangs hung down as the sentient house reached up to envelop me. It looked like being in the mandible of some giant grotesque bug. Connie was going to kill me. She was killing me and feeding my body to the house. I cried in pain as some of the longer screws and nails in the boards tried to scratch at me, drawing blood. Connie raised the knife one more time. Who knows, it might actually be a mercy, but I don't want to be in a position to accurately judge. She brought the knife down and hit one of the baseboards. The room went back to normal. "I'm sorry," she breathed. Was she talking to me or the house? "Just go. Get out of here." Connie used the knife to cut my bonds. I couldn't process it for a minute. Finally, I stood up, rubbing feeling back into my wrists. She never once made eye contact. "Connie, Go! Just go! Get out of here while you still can, while it still lets you." She wouldn't meet my gaze. I wanted to reach out to her, but part of me realized she'd been partaking in this sick ritual time and time again. I'll never know why she chose to spare me. Who knows how many victims they'd be able to find if police were to search Connie's property. But how in the world would they actually be able to serve a warrant on the place? The background check, the easy jobs, the allowance, had it all been part of it? After getting down the stairs, I made a beeline for the nearest exit. I saw bags of my stuff next to the refuse for the burn bin. I grabbed what I could, and from there, I never stopped moving until my car almost ran out of gas, and I stopped here, walking distance from the gas station. The bartender stood up straight. He grabbed another glass off of the rack and set it down. He poured a pair of doubles and slid one over to me. I know you didn't ask me, but I say you should forget about it. You worked a summer on the coast like all the rest of the college kids. Nothing special happened. Take this bottle, finish it off. Go sleep it off on one of the far booths. And don't tell another living soul what you told me. Forget about it. It never happened. Slowly I accepted the bottle, nodding my head. It took me a while. But I finished it, and then I slept it off in one of the bartender's booths. I let the alcohol take me, and as far as I'm concerned, it never happened.